Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dury from Capgemini Invent, and I've got an awesome panel here today to unpack this huge topic of agentic commerce and agentic payments and the shift towards autonomous shopping, autonomous finance, and we're going to get into some of the real detail in a minute. And we're not going to waste any time with lots of introductions, but so I'll quickly run you through the panel. I've got Rob from HyperLayer, I've got Michael from Block, I've got Marisa from Stripe, Omer from AWS, and Stefano from Yapily. So we've got breadth of experience here to look at this. And what we want to do first off the bat, we're going to jump straight into actually bringing this to life. Agentic commerce, what does it really mean? And Marisa, I'm going to come to you for that if I can. So in the prep for today, we were exploring kind of a whole host of different use cases for what this could mean, both end-to-end and for payment flows and for journeys, and looking at pushing that a little bit beyond what we know today. So can you just take a few moments to bring this to life for the audience?
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. It's great to be here at IFGS. I think, so maybe before I jump into sort of where we think the future is heading, it's helpful to take stock of where we are today. AI has just moved so fast in the last few months. Just 6 months ago, when most people thought about AI, it was just a chatbot answering questions, which, while incredibly impressive, was not exactly autonomy. If you wanted to use it for anything like writing an email or doing something, you still had to do a lot of copy-paste. You were addressing the email yourself. In the last few months, that's changed completely. Now AI agents can really do things autonomously. They are agents, they are agentic. And that's what's opening the door to a lot of things that we're going to talk about on this panel. And so right now, with the advent of tools like Claude Code or OpenAI Codex, you can ask an agent to really do things for you. For example, just last week, I was thinking about a new product that we might be able to build, and I had Claude Code help me build a prototype that was working just in under an hour, and it was incredible. And that is just so powerful. It would not have been possible for me before. And so what does the next step look like now that we have these autonomous agents, or agents that are capable of relative autonomy? The next step is, okay, how do we get these agents to interact with the world, and particularly with financial services? And there, it's things like, can an agent hold funds? Can an agent transact? Can businesses accept payments from agents on behalf of humans, and what does that all look like? And so at Stripe, in the last couple of weeks even, we've launched a number of things that are taking us in that direction. We've launched with Privy the ability for agents to hold wallets, so agentic wallets. We've launched the ability for merchants to accept microtransactions from AI agents. And we've launched the ability for agents to spin up services on your behalf. And so bringing it all together, what does that look like? You can imagine now in the future an AI agent that you could send off to do something end-to-end on your behalf. So for example, I work in corporate strategy at Stripe, and so we do a lot of research, obviously. I could send an agent out and say, okay, can you investigate what the impact of current geopolitical tensions on payment flows will be? And that agent could go and unlock an article behind a paywall, download a paid report for me, spin up a service, anything it needs to do to get to a good answer, and then come back to me with a full report. But whereas previously I would have had to go and do all those intermediate steps. So it's really, as we build these capabilities into the agentic framework, we can now unlock a lot more productivity with agents being able to do things end to end.
So building on that a little bit more then, so what do you think that means for the sort of the size of the transactions or the frequencies? Does it change the quantum, the value? Because it starts to push then into, I think, some interesting things that the panelists will have some thoughts on around authorization and permission,
completely
perimeters set for control.
It's such a great point because, if you think about a human, when we make a transaction, every transaction you need to think about, is this the right price? Does it make sense? That has a cognitive cost. And so it doesn't make sense to transact at very small levels. You're never going to buy something for 20 cents, say, because the cost of thinking about it is higher than the value of the transaction. And also because, and I think Stefano, we were talking about this earlier, because the rails don't really permit it either. And so with agents, you start to see the possibility of transacting at much smaller levels. And so for loads of people, for example, who are sitting on data, that starts to get really interesting. Could you, instead of having to sell a subscription to your data that people may not buy, sell access, in microtransactions, download a file, a chart, a specific data point? And those things are really only possible because agents don't have this cognitive cost that we have. So I think it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah. And Stefano, you got some thoughts on the rails?
Yes, if I can build on what Marisa was saying and link into our conversation earlier. Card rails, which is what most of the agents are building on, were designed for a human interaction. Typing your card details, authorizing, confirming, tapping away. The reality is that agents do not work like that. They have API authorization, they work on consent, they transact in real time, and so we have to wonder if we are working on the right rails. For example, account-to-account payment could be a better option because account-to-account payment are real time, there is an API authorization, they are consent-based, and also when you were talking about microtransaction, are card rails designed for that? Probably not. Below £1 or even £5 sometimes, cards do not really work well, while account-to-account payment works. So we talk a lot about new flows on the existing rails, but we should wonder and ask ourselves, are we actually working on the right rails?
Interesting. I think there's some neat transition actually to think a little bit about what's required to sort of engage the audience. That pushes a little bit at is this going to be driven by consumers? Is it going to be driven by B2B? And what does it mean for designing for the challenge to engage with that audience? And Omer, perhaps I can come to you next to explore a little bit of what it takes to design for agents. So the whole concept of AX and UX. And how are you approaching that when you think about it at AWS?
Yeah, definitely. So we as a technologist, we spend a long time into user experience and design thinking and doing user interviews to make sure we as human, our experience is better and we don't have any friction utilizing systems. Now is different. So now agents are actually the ones that are using those systems. And I have this mental model. So if the agent is doing things on our behalf as humans, what is the level of the agent engagement? So it might be that the agent is assisting us, and we're all now using, AI to have assistance, comparison of products, and things like that. But the agent might also be paying for us based on our request, and we are there. There are scenarios when we're not there, so human isn't present, and the agent is acting autonomously. Think about the future where agents are topping up your groceries and doing things all by themselves. So when you think about that, the most important thing you need to think about from an agent experience is not just for the agent, it's for also us as humans, because the agent can achieve his goal, but if you're not satisfied with what he has done, the task, then you're not happy. And that's obviously the agent didn't do its job. So the agent experience is two parts. First, the agent is completing the task, but the human owner, the controller, is satisfied with what has been done. And if you think about it, the key aspect is intent. What did I ask the agent to do? Was the agent clear? So, you ask the agent to buy you shoes and things like that. Was the agent clear on what it needs to buy? The second aspect of agent experience is explainability. Can the agent explain to you why it did something? And also, can you control it? So controllability. Do you set an autonomous agent to do stuff and it goes and it spends all your money, you cannot intervene? One aspect I'll say will be memory and co-evolution. So how the agent is learning about us and adapting to our preferences and remembering the things that we mentioned to the agent, like I didn't like this product, so it remembers it in the future. But also us as human adapting to the agent. This is more like, emotional intelligence, but we're trying to make them more human. And I think the final point is on the data and the process as well. So an agent currently understands some processes because the agent is powered by a large language model, is being trained on all human knowledge. It knows some kind of process, but is it the process that are suitable for me as a person? Is it a process that's suitable for our business? So how can we make sure that agent has access to this refined process that are relevant to us, and also that data that's also relevant to us?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in here. Marisa, do you want to jump in with a thought?
Yeah, no, I think just to build on what Omer was saying, I think there's something here about, one of the things that we need to build with an agent experience is building for the agents themselves so that they can actually do the things that we want them to be able to do. And then there's another side, which is we need to build for humans with agents. And what does it look like to build human UX when we know that humans are now doing things with the agents side by side as companion? And I think a lot of what you were talking about, these components of memory, these components of permissions, all of that is building an experience that makes humans comfortable with having agents do things for them and with them.
Yeah, it also plays in massively to the data intelligence that sits behind it. I think actually context in this situation is king, and the quality of that context as well. And I mean, it's great to see lots of nodding here. Actually, I'm sensing there's some thoughts here. But maybe, Stefano, I come to you first. I mean, we're sort of 7-8 years of real focus deeply into open banking and open finance and all the behavioral shifts you've seen in the sector as well, both consumer and business. What thoughts have you got on how to unlock the data to enable that intelligence that Omer's describing, and then obviously that end-to-end journey and experience?
Thank you, Stephen. I think this conversation has very good timing because just last week the FCA released their open finance roadmap for the next 4 years. We talk about context, so we can start from a simple truth. Agents are just as smart as the data you give them to operate with. So they are just as smart as the data they have about you. And the biggest AI company in the world knows that. I think OpenAI in the last 6 months made 2 acquisitions. Hero AI last week, Roy in October. They strike partnership with Intuit for more than 100 million. They know that a model without the right data is not going to do much. They can talk about money, but they cannot actually do something smart about it. Open banking is actually the data that this model needs because it's real time. It's not about the form that you filled 2 years ago. It's about the money that you have right now. It's a real time, it's consent based, and it's secure. And open banking is just very much at the beginning still. As you said, 7 years make me feel I've been doing this for too long, but the reality still feel like day one. The best is still ahead of us. In the next few years, we're going to have PSD3 and the PSR, which actually will remove a lot of the blocker that were holding back a little bit on the adoption of open banking. And at the same time, the big elephant in the room is FIDA, so the Financial Access Regulation. So when you think about giving an agent context about your financial life, current account is great. However, if you also have your saving, your mortgage, your insurance, your utility, they will really understand the user, the specific financial situation, and they will be able to be a lot smarter and create tools, both agents, but also AI tool in general, which are a lot more specific. So if you want to dream big, you can also bring it a little bit beyond just payment. You can think about, we were talking about programmable payment, but once you have such a rich data layer, you can also start dreaming about programmable credit. Once you have all of this information about the user, you can think about BNPL 2.0. So when you're at the checkout option, at the moment for BNPL, you have an affordability check and then a 3 months payment installment, which is quite probably generic. When I know everything about the Omer financial situation, I know how much he can afford, what are the commitments, what are the spending habits. Maybe it's part of the gig economy, and so he has irregular payment. I can do also not only the affordability check specific for you, but also the payment plan specific for you. So ultimately, data is the part of the equation that I think is still undervalued. The AI capability are there, the A2A rails are there. I think payment data is at the same time the most important things to make agents smart, but also it is the unique thing that the UK and Europe have, and we can use to leapfrog. We spend it, as you said, and you reminded me, several years trying to build, let's say, a regulated, secure, consent-based data layer. It is the context that agents need. We should use that, invest more, so that we can leapfrog the rest of the world and really build the best agents.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the access to that level of data and your comfort or confidence as a consumer or a business with sharing it also drives you to think a lot more about the outcomes in particular. I mean, what's my intent? What's the outcome I want to achieve? And how do I empower an agent to go about achieving that and with a level of autonomy? And I know, Omer, when we were talking before, you talked a little bit about that autonomous nature, that shift to empowering with a set of parameters an agent to perform a series of tasks. I mean, that does press on a lot of the challenges I think that Stefano was just describing and Marisa will bring into life around the authority, the authorization, the authentication, and so on. Have you got any thoughts on that when it comes to kind of looking at the business logic behind getting to that kind of outcome?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we design bad agents, obviously user trust are going to erode, and then people will not be using agents for serious things like payment. I'll probably use an agent for research. So it's upon us as an industry, fintechs and all that, and banks, to actually design really good agents. Make sure that the biggest aspect of agent experience is that the end user is satisfied with what's being achieved. But obviously there are many challenges of building these good agents. Obviously I'm a technologist, so in AWS we have services where you can host agents, and they try to cover the most building blocks of agents. So you need to run an agent first, you need to run in a trusted environment, secure. The second part is that agent needs memory, because you need to remember, and also the memory is, if it's going to work in a way like us human, we need to distill that memory. Otherwise, I'll be accumulating, days and days of your history, which become irrelevant, and then that agent is going to hallucinate. So how do we distill this memory? How do we extract user preferences from it? How we extract episodic, journeys and things like that. Observability is massive, because the regulator is going to ask, who authorized this? What did the agent do? What was the decision? Identity as well. Identity is one of the biggest, I think, challenges. How do you identify this agent? But also, how do you know your agent? So know your agent is a big part. Know your customer is already been established. I own an agent, so how would I be able to also say, this agent is mine, so you know this agent and you can trust it. So really, we have services like Amazon Bedrock Agent Core, where it has identity, gateway, memory, all of these components that actually help you to build these good designed agents, where you can help to build user trust.
Great. I think it's nice link, actually, maybe to sort of bringing Rob and Michael into the conversation here. So as you begin to switch us up and think about what this means for the banks, I think we talked about trust in particular as being an inherent part of the growth and the adoption and scalability here. And in this kind of game, the banks are arguably in a good position when it comes to trust, but probably some challenges around how they look at the controls, how they engage and focus on protecting that. So Rob, what are your thoughts from a banking perspective when it comes to the growth and the sort of that future of kind of AI personal shoppers as an experience?
Yeah. Thanks, and thanks for inviting us to be here, and great to join you all. I think the future, kind of the present and the future that's being described by my panelists is incredibly exciting, but I think it presents an enormous opportunity and challenge for us all, and the banks in particular, and the regulators of banks, and the customers of banks, because on the one hand, the banks are going to need to be deeply engaged in the agentic economy, or they're going to be disintermediated. They're going to be disintermediated by neobanks. They're going to be disintermediated by other disruptors taking advantage of Stefano's open banking capabilities. And on the other hand, they're going to want to be deeply engaged in this, because they have already a lot of the data that Stefano's talking about. And so the risks are existential, and the opportunities are enormous. And as you said, I think they have, incumbents in particular, have a giant advantage that I think is understated in the market these days. Everybody wants to think we all hate banks, but they're some of the most trusted institutions in the world. And if you want to congratulate the terrific work being done at places like Revolut and Starling in the agentic space, where they're doing some incredibly cool stuff. That said, the vast majority of primary accounts are still maintained in the incumbents. So they have an enormous opportunity and challenge to hold on to that, take advantage of the trust they have. And what they need to compete, of course, on the opportunity side, is they need a smart account capability that can keep up with all these agentic instructions and engage with the agents. But boy, oh boy, are they going to need capabilities in fraud, in KYC, in AML, in real-time approvals. If we go to micropayments, you could see the number of transactions absolutely skyrocket. And where are the banks in that regard? And let's not forget, because we're talking a lot about agentic. We talk about it in our company. My founder adopted a little thing, AI personal shoppers. So how are the banks going to survive in the planet of the apes? But this issue is because at the end of the day, the banks are the last mile in the auth. And what we all know, and the regulators here know, that if a customer comes to a bank in the future and says, I'm sorry, my agent did that, the bank's not going to be able to say, sorry, your fault, right? The banks are, at the end of the day, going to have an ability to stop those payments, those fraudulent payments, those mistakes. So the whole systems need to be made much more real-time, much more scalable. So the agent thing is coming. It's coming to the banks. It's coming at the banks. I think it's the big thing.
So with that enormous exam question, I can maybe come to you, Michael. So thinking about the shift in policies, the shift in regulation, the controls, in order for everything we talked about today to operate safely and at scale. I mean, consumers and businesses need a system that they can trust. I mean, reflecting on some of what you've heard here, what are your recommendations? What are your thoughts on how this can be tackled?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. I think there's been a tendency for many years to say that existing regulatory frameworks haven't been designed for the new thing that has emerged, and that's especially true in financial services. Over the years, we've seen governments around the world creating new regulatory frameworks, whether that's for buy now, pay later, for digital assets, for open banking, and even for AI more generally. You know, governments are thinking about, does existing consumer protection law actually do what it needs to do to protect consumers? So yeah, I think this is a really important question to ask, especially when these days actually we've got more outcomes-focused frameworks, including here in the UK, that are designed not to be about a particular product, but about making sure you deliver a good consumer outcome. I was at the FCA's International Forum yesterday, and it was actually great to hear the CEO of the FCA really leaning into the outcomes-focused regulatory frameworks that have been created and are evolving. So things like the consumer duty in the UK, you know, they play a really important role. And I think it's critical that we think about not layering on additional regulation if existing regulation that's outcomes-focused can actually do what it needs to do. And I think in terms of agentic commerce, you know, we've heard today that actually it's still a very rapidly evolving space. We haven't arrived at the agentic commerce destination, as it were, and there's still quite a few unknowns in terms of what it will mean, how it will work, and what the pace of consumer adoption will be. And as you say, you know, trust is at the center of that. It's at the center of all financial services, really. Markets don't develop and consumers don't use products unless they can trust them. I think, you know, historically, if you had a credit card and you were thinking about buying something online at a merchant that you've never used before, you had the confidence to use that card because if something goes wrong, you get your money back. But I guess the problem now is not, did the thing that I bought online get delivered? Actually, the problem is much bigger than what we sort of historically have thought about. And I think as AI develops, you know, we see some companies thinking about self-regulation. You know, Anthropic recently with the upcoming release of Mythos is talking about staging that release. And I think self-regulation does play an important sort of part of the puzzle here. And industry working together with policymakers and regulators is going to be really critical because we are, you know, as the panel has talked about today, it's still kind of unfolding before us. And I think for now, there are probably more questions than answers. And I think some of those questions we've already alluded to. So things like liability and accountability. So when an agent makes a payment and something goes wrong, who's responsible for that? Is it the bank? Is it the consumer? Is it the AI provider? Is it the merchant? What if all of those services are being provided by the same company? And so, you know, lots of really interesting questions. I think the other one about explainability is really important. So what bar are we holding AI agents to? Are the agents acting in our best interests? And that really does mean something in financial services when, you know, that term doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in sort of regular commerce. And finally, I think, are we building these new trust layers in a way that ensures that actually they work well together and are built in the open using open standards? I think at Block, we're pretty passionate about things being done in an open source way. We helped co-found the Agentic AI Foundation recently that operates under the Linux Foundation. And I think we would be keen to see a lot of this work happen in the open so that interoperability is there, open standards are there, and, you know, we can build with confidence.
I think that's brilliant. I think it's very interesting what you're describing about agents acting in your best interests, I guess, and thinking about consumer duty, very much outcome focused. That's the intent and the outcome with which you set or create the parameters for an agent to operate on your behalf becomes incredibly important. So there's a huge user adoption and user learning process that you need to go through that which consumers may get to later than businesses, because perhaps the value is slightly different. So I'm going to be a maverick now and go to a question which I didn't have on the list that was this morning, is where's the money in all this? Where's the economics shifting? So, I mean, obviously, a lot of new services emerging, potentially a lot of new costs, higher frequency of payments, greater volume of disputes, greater issues to manage. So I'll perhaps throw one out there to the panel just to see what your thoughts are on where does the money move? Where's the new cost or the new opportunities and the new economics?
I mean, I can have a stab at this from the way I see it. If we moved from on-premise to the cloud because it removes the heavy lifting, instead of us managing servers and deploying them and ordering them, the cloud, you just do a click and deploy. For me, as a consumer, and even for business, I mean, you talked about the business payment. If the agent is going to remove heavy lifting and undifferentiated activities and things like that, cognitive burden, I'll be happy to pay for it. So it could be subscription. Imagine your Alexas, your Google Now, all your Siri, your assistant. If that's going to have an agent that's smart enough to make your life easy, then I'll pay a fee for it. So that's my perspective.
Good. And Marisa, I know you had some thoughts on new experiences, new services.
Yeah, I think the way I've been thinking about this is what new markets open up now that these things are possible? Like, what are things that previously we couldn't transact on that now become markets that are viable commercially? And so I think microtransactions does open up new markets in a way that previously wasn't possible. There are all sorts of things that would never have been sold otherwise. I think there are companies everywhere that are sitting on troves of data that all of a sudden become assets that they can monetize, or experiences or types of work that previously weren't viable that are now viable. So that's like one aspect of where the value is shifting. Another thing I think about is, if you have agents that are helping you, how does the matching between what a consumer is trying to buy and the product that they get shift? Presumably, as agents get to know you better, they get to have persistent memory, they're better at search, you should get a lot better matching and a lot better quality of products being sold to users. And so maybe the amount of shopping or the amount of commerce stays stable, but the outcomes for consumers are a lot better because all of a sudden they're getting things that actually match their needs, and they're not having to rely on proxies like, oh, I know this brand, or oh, whatever, to substitute for like a proper evaluation of the product. So I think, as well as new markets, there's kind of shifts in consumer outcomes that I think are quite exciting.
Rob?
I mean, if you look at it from the money, what is the definition of money in the modern world, and how are you going to pay for things if we're going to talk about that? But Stefano touched on it. I may want to pay with cash, I may want to pay with credit, I may want to pay by drawing down my money market fund. If these agents are going to be so powerful, the only thing we know about human nature is every time something gets better, we want it to do even more. So it's going to be about 1 microsecond that we're going to be satisfied with an agent buying a thing from a place for us from our current account. We're going to instantly want it to look at our whole financial life and help it. As you said, you'd pay for eliminating brain space. How do I optimize my financial outcomes across all of the things that I consider my financial life to do the things I want to do with my money? So I think the money is going to be in building those agents that can do that, maybe with Stefano's help and bringing data sets together through open banking. And it's going to be the winners are going to be the ones that consolidate those services most effectively. And you see a lot of the disruptors are going for that big time. Why is my wealth management over here and my banking over here and my insurance over here and my credit over there? I think, how are the agents going to stitch that together? How are the players in the middle going to consolidate that as a business model matter? That's going to be the race.
Fantastic. Stefano, anything you want to add?
I love the answer that my friends have given, but clearly time is the most valuable things I have in life, right? So what Omer was saying is probably the best answer, because now I'm paying probably to 3-4 different AI tools for the potential of using them and making myself more efficient with my time, right? So that's definitely something I would be happy. An agent that saves me time and does something which is very specific to my needs, something I'm happy to pay upfront and see if it works. And what Marisa was saying about opening up new industry, we have been talking for years about machine-to-machine transaction, my fridge buying my food. At the moment, it's really a dream. And now I think this will be possible. So there are new industries that are going to be built. I think money will shift, but the opportunity is there.
Fantastic. So being efficient with my time, I'm an agent for Innovate Finance today, and I've got 2 seconds left, so I'm going to bring this to a close. So thank you to my brilliant panel, so Stefano, Omer, Marisa, Michael, and Rob. Thank you, everyone.